Once again, leading off today's video by saying a huge, heartfelt thank you to everyone who has showed up over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel. Especially recently, the ladies in my audience. The response has been unprecedented in the last couple of weeks. We have been talking about the psychology of a shit it's the fan situation as it specifically applies to women. Now, some might think it won't be any different. It will be completely different for women than it will be for men. You can only stockpile so many beans, bullets, band-aids, weapons before survival becomes what you have between your ears and not what you have down in the basement. It's about understanding who are going to be the right people to be around and who are going to be the wrong people to be around. This takes a fundamental understanding of psychology and how it's going to affect both men and women. Case in point, first season, second season of The Walking Dead, they have this survival group. Now, this group didn't get to choose who they were and were not going to be around. But you could look at different situations that were presented, and you could make the case that perhaps this individual or that individual might do better off on their own than in this large group, which is directly contradictory to the idea that the larger group you have, the more community safety you have. That's true sometimes, not always the case. But once again, we're going to cover the details of this over at the Patreon channel. Only $1 per month. Fully refundable first 90 days. You can watch the videos, all of them. There's over 100 for a month, for 2 months. Third month comes by and it's like, this isn't for me. You can directly inbox me over here and say, you know what? I've seen it and it's just not something I think that I can benefit from. Everything you've spent comes right back to you. The $2 or $3. So we would love to have you over there. Now, in today's video, it has happened again in Argentina, where science has said, we think this is only as big as these creatures ever were. Oh, but look, now here's a fossil showing them 50% bigger. The picture you're looking at is not embellished in any way. They have found what could only truly be described as a real dragon in Argentina. This thing, its body was as big as a school bus. Its wingspan was even larger. They had found creatures like this before that were much smaller, but this one dwarfs all of them. And it goes to a theory that I've had a long time about the part of Argentina that meets Antarctica, that these stories of dragons aren't made up, and they aren't exaggerated. This is how big this creature was. Now, real quick question. How many people in my audience have watched Game of Thrones and saw the dragons in Game of Thrones and thought, oh, wow, that's a flight of fancy? Well, guess what? It's reality. This creature existed. They have a fossil proving it. Giant dragon of death with 30-foot wingspan unearthed in Argentina. Thanatos dragon is the largest pterosaur ever found in South America. The aptly named Thanatos dragon, dragon of death pterosaur, was a flying reptile that lived alongside dinosaurs during the Cretaceous period. Researchers in Argentina have unearthed the largest pterosaur species ever found, dubbed dragon of death by paleontologists. 2 giant flying reptiles were discovered in the Platier Formation, an outcrop located in the province of Mendoza. The 2 specimens' wingspans measured approximately 23 feet and 30 feet respectively. Researchers confirmed that they are as darkids, a family of pterosaurs that lived blah, 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 18 quintillion years ago, whatever. They were known for their very large skulls, larger than their bodies sometimes, hyper-elongated necks, and short, robust bodies. They literally have the smoking gun. The technical name, Thanatos Drakon Amaru. Now, this word Amaru could be a video in itself because it is the root of the Americas, meaning flying serpent. But we'll get into that another day. Now, the reason I bring up the Game of Thrones reference, and a lot of people like Florida Maquis, that's HBO, it was an incredibly popular series, and their take on the story was very unique, and it should have gone for many more seasons than it did, but all of a sudden, at the end of, was it season 6 or 7? I forget. It just fell off a cliff. Literally fell off a cliff and just ended in the most horrible way, which makes me think that the creators of the series were working from a document they found in reality that had an end to it. They weren't just thinking this up. This wasn't some flight of fancy that somebody had. It was based on something that happened, an historical document in real life. And here's why I think this. I've covered this in other videos, but this find in Argentina proves something. Now, the map you're looking at is allegedly a fictional map that was created for the series Game of Thrones. You have this peninsula over here. The very northern part is frozen. This part over here to the left is where the vast majority of the series takes place. All of the different locations. This area over here to the right is an area that is referenced by discussion during the series, but no actual events take place over here. Now, when you look at this right here, and this is the exact same map to the right, versus where Antarctica meets Argentina, you see some striking similarities. What you primarily see is, okay, up here, this makes sense. You've got this peninsula, it's frozen, it kind of goes off the map, and then you go down a little farther this way, and then the land goes to the right or to the east, whatever you want to call it. And you kind of see that here, but there's this giant gap in the middle where there's an entire land that's been destroyed. And what do we see in reality? We see it looks like a giant wall of water came and washed away something that used to be here, that used to connect Antarctica with the tip of Argentina. A lost land, a lost world, a lost history. What could it have been? There are too many things that are in common. This area here being frozen and inhabited by giants. Who remembers from Game of Thrones where the giants were? They were up in the frozen north. And we've shown multiple pieces of evidence that showed there were giants in Antarctica. And then there was this, what they called in the Game of Thrones fictional series, allegedly, this narrow sea. Well, there was this passage down here where people were able to transit from the Atlantic to the Pacific, much larger now, because all of this is gone. The Summer Sea, the Argentine Sea, the layout, it's literally like somebody lifted a story from a hidden history, and they were trying to tell the story. Plus this entire idea of winter is coming. Those of you who haven't watched Game of Thrones, wouldn't really understand this, but the entire series, all 5 or 6 seasons, is based on this idea that they had been living in an eternal summertime. Not really eternal, but a long-lived summertime. And that winter only came so many generations. It didn't come every year. It didn't even come every 5 years. It was more like decades. And when you look at how Antarctica is, where they have a long period of a dark winter, and then they have a long period of summer. If there had been a land bridge, an uninterrupted land bridge, that affected the weather at one time, there could have been areas of Antarctica that were quite habitable for most of the year. Even science has said this for a long, long time. This article out of Argentina just confirms. And I think they're going to continue to find larger and larger specimens. Because they would have had an unending amount of food at the South Pole. Those dragons, what did they eat? I mean, seriously, think about this. This thing is as big as a school bus. What did it eat? The answer? Probably anything it wanted to. There was even a season in Game of Thrones when the dragons got to a certain size, they were becoming a pest, and they were raiding farmers' livestock, and they had to be the farmers had to be reimbursed in gold for the loss because they were eating so many sheep and cows and goats every single day. It's just crazy. If you watch the series and then you look at what they've just found, you look at the history of Argentina, and you look at the map, you'd have to be blind not to see the parallels. And the fact that the series, after a certain amount of time, they just couldn't think up anything new or interesting to talk about, shows that they weren't working from their own imaginations. They were working from a reality that we have been hidden from. And I guess I'll leave that there. But once again, would love to have you over at the Patreon channel. We are going to be talking about some things that you can't really talk about on YouTube. We have the ability to put the videos up at a place called Vimeo, which is different than Google, different than YouTube. They don't really have access over there. So we can take the gloves off and speak like adults. So I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you guys for hanging out. Very much appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.